All right. Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Advanced Social Media Accessibility. My name is Kevin Hauer and I'm with IAAP. I'm joined today by my colleagues Samantha Evans and Rachel Paul, also with IAAP. Before we do officially get the webinar started today, I want to review a couple of quick technical things with everyone. You should all be logged into the Zoom webinar platform, or you can follow along over the phone and with the presentation that was uploaded to our website. As an attendee of the website, you are welcome to download the presentation at any time. Simply go to the handout page that was included in your registration confirmation, as well as in the reminder emails that we sent out to you over the last couple of days. Go to the handout page and you can download the full slide deck from that page. During the webinar today, if you have any questions, our presenter does plan to stop a couple times throughout to answer your questions, as well as a longer Q&A at the end. Please don't hold your questions. Just go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Zoom has a nice little Q&A tool. It's part of the menu. Put your questions in there, and it's a great way for us to make sure we address all of your questions. So please put them in there as we go. If you want to put them in the chat, that's fine too. I'll do my best to make sure we get to all of those. And when we do have pauses, if anyone wants to ask questions verbally, I'm happy to unmute your line and let you do so. Just let me know in the chat. To guard against background noise, we have gone ahead and put all of the attendees on mute. As I mentioned, if you do need to ask a question verbally, just let me know. I'll be happy to correct that for you. If you are hearing double audio, that means you're connected via both the phone and your computer. You've got two options. You can either hang up the phone and listen via just your computer, or you can mute your computer and listen via your phone, whichever has the better audio for you. I also want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded and it will be available in our archive library. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to announce our speaker today. Gian Wild is going to present this session on advanced social media accessibility. Gian is the CEO of Accessibility Oz and has worked in the accessibility industry since 1998. She had the very first accessible website in Australia and is active with the W3C WCAG working group. We're delighted to have Gian with us as today's presenter, and I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Just a couple of updates. I didn't have the first accessible website. I worked on the first accessible website, and I am not. Raf, who's my co-presenter today, is actually on the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, but Accessibility Oz is a W3C member. So, thank you very much for joining us today. This is a continuation of the previous social media presentation that I did earlier in the year. However, if you didn't manage to see that, that's just fine. We'll be covering the same kind of information a little bit differently today. If you have seen it, there's certainly enough in here to hopefully keep you interested. So I want to start by just showing you a photo of our team. There's 8 of us sitting in front of a creek. We all got together at CSUN this year. And when I started Accessibility Oz in 2011, I wanted to support people with disabilities by providing them with employment opportunities. And so 60% of my staff have some kind of significant disability that affects their daily life. And yet, you know, you wouldn't necessarily know that to look at us. We all look like, for want of a better term, normal people. And it's important to know that disabilities are often hidden in plain sight. It isn't something that you might necessarily know if you're working with people, whether they have a disability or not. So I've had a range of different staff with different disabilities, including staff with dyslexia, moderate vision impairment, severe vision impairment, epilepsy, migraines, physical impairment, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, PTSD, and Asperger's. A little bit about me. I worked on the first Australian accessible website in 1998, and I spent 6 years contributing to WCAG 2 as part of the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I spent 6 years at Monash University managing their usability and accessibility services division, and I do have a special interest in higher education. If you are in higher education and you're going to Accessing Higher Ground later this month, I'm actually running this session again, but if you have any colleagues that are going, please let them know. I'm also doing a couple of days of training and speaking on video player accessibility. I founded Accessibility Oz in 2011 and spoke at the United Nations on the importance of web accessibility in 2015. In terms of Accessibility Oz, in Australia, we're located in Melbourne and Brisbane. In the United States, we're located in Portland, San Francisco, and New York. And in Europe, we're in Madrid and Gdansk in Poland. In terms of our products and resources, a number of our products are free. So I'm just going to go through this very briefly. We have an accessible video player, and if that's of interest to you, have a look on our website. We do an analysis of the accessibility of video players every year to determine, the kind of accessibility issues video players tend to have. We have an automated accessibility testing tool called Ozart. We've got a database of accessibility errors, screenshots, code, and solutions. And as an attendee of one of my sessions, you're welcome to get 3 months free access to Ozwiki. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let Kevin know and maybe respond to the email that has the recording, and he can pass on your email addresses. We also have some free products. Accessibility Voices, a11yvoices.com, is a series of blog posts written by people with disabilities about their accessibility experiences. And we're always looking for bloggers, and we pay our bloggers. So if you are a person with a disability who'd like to write about, the accessibility experience of a product that you use, please get in contact. We also have a series of accessibility fact sheets on our website, which are quite detailed fact sheets on things like coding or content or interactive maps or images, etc. Talks about why those things are accessible or why those things should be accessible, what happens if they're not, and it gives a testing checklist as well as developer guides, including correct and incorrect code, and they're freely available under Creative Commons. We also have an accessible slideshow for those developers in the audience. You can access them under our resources top level item on our website, and that's available under GPL. And we have a series of 16 developer videos on how to code a field label, when to use ARIA, what is ARIA, when not to use ARIA, etc. All under 5 minutes. They're also available under Creative Commons, so you can grab them and put them on your intranet or share them as you like. Anyway, that's enough about me and my company. Today we're going to talk about social media. So why is social media so important for people with disabilities? So we find the statistics that almost 3.4 billion active social media users are in the world. On average, people have 5.54 social media accounts. The average time spent on social media is 116 minutes per day, which is almost 2 hours. Excuse me. There's a little bit of typing in the background, so that is, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. 91% of retail brands use 2 or more social media channels, and 81% of all small and medium businesses use social media. And what we find is that social media is something across the age groups. Yes, people aged 18 to 29 are more likely to use social media, where about 88% of people in that age group are using social media. But even when you get to the 65 and older, 37% of people aged 65 or older are using social media. So it is something that, really reaches everybody. And in terms of, employment, as well as, employment for people with disabilities, what we find as a very conservative estimate in in the US is that 10.2% of the people with disabilities are actively looking for work, and that's double what it is for people without disabilities. We find that the percentage of recruiters who use LinkedIn is 95%. So, you know, if LinkedIn is inaccessible, for example, then that could definitely affect a person with a disability's prospects. And the percentage of HR managers that have reconsidered hiring a candidate after looking at social media is 55%. And once again, if, you know, say you're working in marketing and you don't have a very active Twitter profile, maybe because Twitter is not accessible, then that might also have an impact. So there are 5 main reasons behind social media use. The first is personal, so things like an online commentary of personal thoughts, sharing photos, discussing social events. So I take a lot of photos. I got a new fancy camera a year ago, and I have found that I like taking photos of birds. So I take lots and lots of photos of birds, and the best ones I post to Instagram and Facebook as a way of sharing them with my friends. Work examples include things like creating a resume, creating professional connections, discussing job opportunities. And don't think this is just LinkedIn. Raf, who's on the call with us today, heard about the Job with Accessibility Oz through Twitter and reached out to me through LinkedIn. So, you know, it's not just LinkedIn, but a lot of job opportunities are through other social media networks as well. And then we have entertainment. So things like sharing videos, following discussion from celebrities, discussing strategies in online games, etc. A lot of things are now being posted to social media, where before you might have relied on, you know, buying a magazine or something along those lines. The fourth is provision of goods and services, things like sharing information about a product, responding to user feedback about a product, accessing government services. So for example, if you have problems with the product, I, for example, have a little gadget that allows me to, like a USB hub, and I couldn't figure out what connector it used, and I didn't have the connector, so I tweeted it at Logitech or whoever it was and asked them what the connector was, and they told me. Education includes things like participation in online classes and sharing learning resources, especially things like YouTube. There's a lot of information on YouTube that helps students and teachers alike. So why isn't social media accessible? So there's really one thing that kind of shows you how social media is not accessible. And this is one example. So this is Crikey. This is on Facebook, and this is a couple of years ago. And it's advertising an article, and in the article headline is some code. So it says span class equals quo, end span, why sacrifice yourself? And it's not that Crikey just decided to put code in their headings. It's that they always had that code in their headings, and Facebook would, would not show it. But Facebook made a change, and then all of a sudden that code was showing up again. So this is because Facebook changes all the time. So Facebook tends to change sometimes upwards of 5 times a day. And the last time I talked to anyone who worked at Facebook, they didn't actually have a testing team. They might now, but their testing process was actually to release their updates to their own staff. Their own staff would then log bugs. They'd fix those bugs and then release that to the general population. Now, of course, the problem with that is that if none of your staff use a screen reader or has a vision impairment or is reliant on the keyboard, then you're not going to actually be testing those things. So really the big problem is these things change all the time. And so even from the testing that I did 6 months ago, there are differences between that social media then and the social media now in terms of accessibility. So even if you woke up tomorrow and all the social media networks had magically become accessible, that doesn't mean that they would be able to necessarily remain accessible. This is another example. It's a keyboard trap on YouTube, and this occurred for about 2 months in 2018. So basically you tab through the home page on YouTube and it's got a bunch of different videos, and you tab to this vertical ellipsis, which drops down a drop down that has not interested, add to watch later, add to playlist, and report. Your next tab takes you to not interested, and the next tab then takes the user to the address bar in the browser, and they have to start going through the page again. Now they still have those vertical ellipses, but now it's actually accessible. So once again, that's another example of how things change so quickly on social media. Another example is LinkedIn. So we've got this posting posting a post, and there is a settings button. In 2017, the button was unlabeled, so it was just called button. In 2018, it was labeled, but it was labeled as button IP 24DP button. And in 2019, the button was actually replaced entirely. So once again, these things change all the time. So that's one of the reasons, or that's, you know, the main reason why we've been doing this testing for the last 3 years. We test a whole bunch of different social media networks for accessibility compliance, and I release the results around about this time every year. So in terms of what was tested, we tested, it wasn't an WCAG audit as such, because these things are incredibly complex and we you know, have limited time. So on each social media network, we tested a standard user journey, which is registering, logging in, reading an item, submitting an item, and submitting an item with accessibility features, if those accessibility features exist. We also tested user functionality, which is using it with the keyboard only, increasing text size, and using a screen reader. And Raf, who is on this webinar today, is our expert screen reader user. And I'm a big proponent of ensuring that if you're going to test with a screen reader, that the person testing is someone who is entirely reliant on a screen reader and not necessarily an accessibility specialist who's learnt how to use a screen reader. And so Raf's been working with us for 4 or 5 years now, and he's an absolute expert, and we'll go into how that affected the results later on. In terms of the networks that we tested, for 2016, 17 and 18, we tested Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube and Twitter. And this year, we actually tested Instagram and Pinterest as well. Next year, we're looking at maybe adding Tumblr and TikTok. So please be aware, this is not a complete audit. There may be other accessibility problems. There no doubt are other accessibility problems, but these are the things that we identified. Does anyone have any questions about maybe what we tested, why we tested what we tested, etc.?
We don't have any questions in the queue at the moment. Judy did bring up one point though. I mentioned the handout was available for download. That link was broken, but I have corrected that. So if you do visit the handout page now, the handout is now available for download. So sorry about that. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and type them. And if anyone would like to ask verbally, please let me know in the chat. I'll be happy to unmute your lines. Give everyone a moment to do that. All right, I'm not seeing anyone typing, so I think we can move on.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk briefly about the common accessibility issues or the common findings. So I'm going to talk about the overview of accessibility compliance. And this is a very complex table. And I actually go into this in more detail in the first seminar, if you want to look at this in more detail. So basically, we broke it down into keyboard. So keyboard accessibility is things like making sure all items are keyboard accessible, that they have a highly visible keyboard focus indicator, that they have a keyboard focus indicator, that there are no tab stops that are not visible, etc. No autoplay means that the video doesn't autoplay. If it does autoplay, that it meets the WCAG requirements for autoplay. And then we also tested for whether there was the ability to turn autoplay off in settings. We tested also that the video could be paused using the keyboard and the mouse, as well as touch. We tested page titles, if they were unique, if they were descriptive, if they had a reference to the site. We tested headings to ensure there were headings on all pages, that headings were coded with H1, H2, H3, etc., that content wasn't coded as a heading, that headings were nested properly. We tested forms, so things like field labels are coded properly, submit buttons are coded properly, that radio buttons and checkboxes have field sets, etc. And we tested for, accurate use of ARIA and HTML. Now, we also tested on desktop, iOS and Android. And if something failed on one of those requirements, then we have failed it here. So I'm just going to go through through each social media network. So Facebook only passed keyboard autoplay and settings, and video can be paused. Instagram only passed page titles. LinkedIn only passed autoplay and settings, and video can be paused. Pinterest didn't pass anything at all. Twitter only passed autoplay and settings and page titles, and YouTube only passed video can be paused and page titles. So this is actually on our blog, so with pass and fails in an accessible format. And if you download this PowerPoint from IAAP, there is an alternative text that goes through this in more detail, as well as this being an accessible table. If you still can't get the content of this, please let us know and we'll find another way of getting it to you. But really, when you look at this, you find that Facebook only passed 3 things, Instagram 1, LinkedIn 2, Pinterest none, Twitter 2, and YouTube 2. So that's pretty bad. Then we're going to talk about screen reader compliance. And Raf is going to talk a little bit about this or answer your questions about this. So we actually had 3 things here. This is a desktop screen reader results. We've got fail, it couldn't be done at all. We've got an exclamation point, which is basically it was incredibly difficult. Now, Raf is an expert screen reader user, and he, looks at the code and can figure out a way of doing things. But if there's an exclamation point, it probably means that novice screen readers are not going to be able to undertake that task. And then there's a pass. And so these are just the desktop results. So in Facebook, he was unable to register and had great difficulty logging in, creating a post or reading a post. With Instagram, he could not register, could log in and could read a post, but found it very difficult to create a post with accessibility features. In LinkedIn, he could log in and read a post with accessibility features, but found it very difficult to register or create a post with accessibility features. Pinterest found registering very difficult, could log in and read a post, but couldn't create a post with accessibility features. Twitter, register, create post and read post were very difficult, but logging in he could do. YouTube, the same thing, register, create post and read a post were very difficult, and log in he could do. So that's desktop. So there's a few things here that I want to talk about specifically. So Facebook, one of the reasons why we failed this is that Raf, for some reason, when he was accessing the register feature, would trigger the Google reCAPTCHA, and the Google reCAPTCHA is not accessible. No doubt, despite what Google says. Google has actually disabled the audio part of the Google reCAPTCHA, so that made that process completely inaccessible to him. He also found it difficult to add alt attributes to Facebook, and navigating using headings was very difficult because of infinite scrolling, and also sharing a post was very difficult. Instagram, he got through some of the registration process, but then got to a page that just said, sorry, something went wrong, and he couldn't move any further. And then also when it came to reading a post, sometimes the next button couldn't be accessed by the screen reader. LinkedIn, the field labels are very unclear, which made registering difficult. And also when you're adding alt text, it has a set number of letters that your alt text can be, and you hear the number of letters after you add each letter. So basically it says, you write A and it says 199 characters remaining. You write B and it says 198 characters remaining, which can be very annoying. Pinterest, editing the name was very difficult, as was selecting topics. Twitter, the verification was very difficult, as is following someone. The alternative text was very problematic because you actually have to turn on that feature in the settings, and which basically, means that a lot of people that people that don't know about it won't know to turn it on. And Raf has written a fantastic blog post about the importance of social media accessibility features, which is on our blog. And the lack of headings also makes using Twitter quite difficult. YouTube, when registering, the phone number and date of birth fields were not accessible, but Raf found a way around that. Fields were not labeled, and you can accidentally publish a video, which is not a good thing. And of course, there are no audio descriptions or transcripts. So with the iOS results, what he found was that there were some cases that he couldn't actually do anything at all, not necessarily because of the screen reader, but because of our creating multiple accounts, etc., etc. So the results for the iOS screen reader results was that he found registering and creating a post in Facebook very difficult, but could log in and read a post. Instagram, he couldn't register, and found it difficult to create a post, but we couldn't actually get the login or the read a post feature to operate, and we weren't sure if that was a screen reader or a site thing, so we've just put not applicable there. LinkedIn, he found that he could register and log in and read a post, but creating a post found couldn't be done, but once again, we weren't sure if that was a site or a screen reader thing. Pinterest, Raf couldn't register. He could log in, but he couldn't create a post or read a post. Twitter, he could actually do everything easily, which is great. And YouTube couldn't register because it's based on creating a Google account, and found logging in, creating a post and reading a post difficult. And then the Android, oh, sorry, let me go back a bit. So that's what I wanted to, so the next one is Android, screen reader results. And so we found that registering and creating a post on Facebook was very difficult. Logging in and reading a post with Facebook could be done. Instagram couldn't register and couldn't go any further. LinkedIn, the register, login and read a post could be done and easily, and creating a post was not applicable. Pinterest could not register, but could log in and could create a post with accessibility features, but we weren't sure whether the inability to read a post was due to the site or the screen reader. Twitter could register, log in and creating a post were very difficult, and reading a post was possible. And YouTube, once again, registering couldn't be done, and logging in, creating a post and reading a post were very difficult. So does anyone have any questions for Raf or myself about that very detailed testing?
If anyone does have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A as we go. I'm happy to read those aloud when Gian pauses. We do have one question from Megan. When you tested social media on mobile, did you access the social media channels through the apps or through the mobile browser?
Excellent. That is a great question. We tested the apps.
Just as a follow-up, do you think there would be significant differences between the app and browser experience on mobile?
Yes, definitely. And it's generally accepted that the mobile version of Facebook is more accessible than the Facebook mobile app. But we, as this is not like a complete analysis, we wanted to test what people were most likely to use. And we figured that on mobile, they are most likely to use the apps.
All right, thank you. That is the only question we have for now.
Okay, excellent. Raf, would you like to add anything?
Yes, first of all, hello, everybody. I would like to stress one thing. Whenever it is said that creating a post was difficult, it means creating a post with an image with alt attribute, because sometimes just typing a text might be easy, but whenever I tried to add an image, then it made everything difficult. And just a general impression. My impression is that none of social media designers or providers makes full accessibility tests of the logging in process, registering process. So none of the processes I tested was fully smooth. There were always some bigger or smaller difficulties.
Thank you. And we should all thank Raf, because I know that testing, when I did the testing of social media, it was very frustrating. I can't imagine how frustrating it would have been for Raf. And so he spends a few weeks every year doing this testing. So, I thank him for all his hard work. So I'm going to talk briefly about the 5 steps to making social media accessible. The first step is creating contact details or adding contact details. So make sure your contact information is available on every social media account page that you have. And when I say contact information, I mean a primary phone number and an email address and a link to your website. You must have those 3 things. The second step is to repeat content. Make sure your social media content is available on your website. So, linked off the homepage or in a social media section. If you look at the Accessibility Oz site, for example, we have the latest 5 tweets just on our webpage. And you have a lot of different tools that can pull that information in, do it automatically. Just make sure that whatever the output is that it's accessible. Provide, if you're like a very large organization or something like that, provide the options for daily or email or weekly digests, where someone can just get an email of all your social media posts, every week or every day. Make sure there are easy points of entry for more information. So for example, if you have a, register with us and you could win an iPad, use this code, then make sure that that information is also on your register page on your website. And also post your social media to multiple outlets, because as you can see from looking at this, really none of the social media sites are accessible. Some are definitely more accessible to others, but we only tested with screen reader users, and we looked at the keyboard as well. But that there might be a specific type of social media network that is more accessible to people using Dragon Naturally Speaking, for example, or a magnifier. So making sure you post the same content to multiple outlets is really important. And it's pretty straightforward to do that, but I will talk about some of the pitfalls of that a little bit later on. Provide alternative apps. So make sure you have a social media page on your site. So I don't mean just links to your social media networks, but also a page that says, about our social media. Here is our Facebook, here is our Instagram, here is our blah, blah, blah. And also have there, if you have trouble accessing this content, this is who you talk to. And also on that page, provide links to the social media accessibility tips and support pages, because a lot of the social media networks do have tips and support pages. However, they're often very difficult to find, and they're often not something that users will necessarily know to go looking for. So having them on a page on your site is really important. And also consider saying, okay, if you have trouble with YouTube because you have low vision, what we would suggest is that you actually use the I Can't YouTube player. Here's a link, and you copy and paste the URL into that, and it's a different player. Or if you have problems with Twitter, you can go use EasyChirp, and this is how you use that. So educating your users is a really important part. The fourth step is using camel case. So for hashtags, you should capitalize the first letter of each word. So for a three-word hashtag code motion Rome, you should capitalize C, M, and R. Or for International Association of Accessibility Professionals, you would capitalize the I, the A, and the P. Do avoid abbreviations. Be aware that screen readers are not going to read them out very well. And you should limit your hashtags and add them only to the end, unless those hashtags are full words. So if you're using a hashtag like hash accessibility, that's fine to use that in a middle of a sentence. But if you're using a hashtag hash A11Y, that should be at the end of the sentence. Avoid misspellings, because visually people can often tell what it is that you mean, but screen reader users can't. And where you link to others' content on YouTube, you should warn users of the autoplay, the lack of transcripts, captions, and audio descriptions. And you should not really be sending people to YouTube, but obviously if you're sending people to other people's content, then that's sometimes what you have to do. And step 5, test. So consider testing your social media with users with disabilities and against WCAG 2, or when you receive complaints about social media, consider forwarding them on, because I'm not sure who is on this call today, but I'm sure that there are people here from organisations that have a lot more clout than Accessibility Oz or even IAAP. And if they receive an email saying, we're seriously considering, dumping your social media network for another because it's not accessible, and you're a large organisation, say, a Wells Fargo or a McDonald's or something like that, they might actually take note. Now, what I have found is that it does seem to be that they are, listening to these presentations that I do, which is great. But every time I do the testing, I reach out to the social media networks, and I'm yet to get much of a response, with the exception of Jennison Assumption from LinkedIn, who's always been very helpful. So it is difficult to get in contact with them, but have a think if you are from an organisation that is quite large and holds some sway, actually contacting them could be a way of making this stuff more accessible. Does anyone have any questions on that before I get into the actual social media networks themselves?
I don't see any questions at the moment, but feel free to go ahead and type those into the Q&A. I'll give you just a moment. All right, I don't see anyone typing, but if you do have a question, go ahead and put it in and we'll get it at the next pause.
Excellent. So I'm going to go through each social media network now and then talk about the detailed results. Also, how to turn off autoplay and add the accessibility features. I'm going to pause at the end of each social media network for questions. So please do put in your questions for the chat. And so that way, Kevin, if there are no questions, you can just say no questions and I'll move on to the next one. So the detailed Facebook results. So we saw these before, but basically past keyboard autoplay and settings and video can be paused, and failed no autoplay, page titles, headings, forms, ARIA HTML, the screen reader register function, and screen reader login, create post and read post were very difficult. One of the things that we found with Facebook is that their headings were not coded as headings. They were coded as span role equals heading, which is really not a good thing. And also with the iOS Facebook, it is possible that there were ways to create a post with accessibility features, just the screen reader user couldn't find it. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight that was good is here we've got multiple skip links. Now, I do think that they've gone a little bit overboard with skip links. They've got main section, Facebook banner, search Facebook, navigate apps, reminders, trending topics and more, Facebook footer, create a post, newsfeed, chat with friends. The reason why they've done this is because they use infinite scrolling in the center column. So the way that Facebook is laid out is you have a header, you have left-hand navigation, a central column with all your posts, and then a right-hand column with additional information. Now, if you're using a keyboard, you can never get to that right-hand column because as you're tabbing through the tabbing through the posts, it'll just infinitely add more content. So that's why actually having these skip links is a way to get around that. But infinite scrolling is still inaccessible. So definitely should be avoided. In Facebook, the page titles don't have the page titles in the sub pages are they actually reference the name of the person, but they don't reference that you're actually on Facebook. And page titles referencing the existing site is an important part of WCAG, and it basically reinforces to screen reader users that they haven't moved on to a different page. So here you can see it's got a bracket 1 in bracket Gian Wild, and that's the page title as opposed to, Gian Wild Facebook. When creating a new account, the first name, surname, mobile number, birthday, etc., none of these are coded with label 4 or ID. So I want to talk a little bit about turning off autoplay, because one of the things that I found was that when we went looking for how to do all these things is that they were often difficult to determine if you could turn off autoplay, under which section it was, etc. And it often wasn't even consistent amongst the same social media network. So it's different on desktop to iOS to Android. So if you want to turn off autoplay on desktop, there is an arrow in the top right-hand corner. You select settings. Then you select the videos link on the left-hand side, and then you can select autoplay default on and off. And I've put this in a blog post as well on our website, so you can have a look at this and use these to turn these off. On Android, on iOS, the iOS app, you select the hamburger menu in the bottom right, select settings and privacy, then select settings, then select videos and photos under media and contacts, and then you can select autoplay for on mobile data and Wi-Fi, or on Wi-Fi and never. On Android, the hamburger menu is in the top right. Select settings and privacy, then settings, then select media contacts, and then you get autoplay on mobile data and Wi-Fi connections on Wi-Fi or never. Now, one thing I want to say about, oh no, this is Facebook. So I wanted to talk about YouTube autoplay, but that's a little bit later on. And then adding alternative text, once again, it's different depending on where you're accessing Facebook. The way to do it with the desktop is you add an image, you don't post it, but you add an image, then you edit the image, select the alt text button, and then you have to select override generated alt text, and then you can add the alt text. In iOS, you post the photo. So you have to add the photo, then post it. And then you tap on the posted photo and you select the horizontal ellipsis in the top right, select edit alt text, and then you can tap the override generated alt text, and then you can add the alt text. And you are unable to add alt text on Android. So in terms of making Facebook accessible, make sure you're always adding alternative text to images. You should link to transcripts of videos. It's always best to load your videos to YouTube and add captions there and then pull them into a Facebook post. And there is an accessibility tips page on Facebook that you should link to. The alternative, more accessible methods to the desktop or the mobile app is the Facely HD mobile app on iOS, m.facebook.com, and the Metal Facebook app on Android. And please let me know if you've come across any other alternative methods that are more accessible, because those are the ones that I've heard of, but I'm sure there are more. Does anyone have any questions on that?
None so far.
Excellent. Let's go into detailed Instagram results. So in Instagram, the only thing that passed was page titles. Let me just get my notes. The page titles were things like Ellen on Instagram or Gian on Instagram. Videos autoplay on Instagram, and you also can't actually upload a photo to Instagram on desktop, which is interesting. The screen reader results, Raf was unable to register and found logging in, posting and reading a post very difficult. So this here keyboard focus order was a failure. So the keyboard focus order actually skips over the header, and the header has the Instagram logo, the search, location, your likes and your profile, and actually starts at the first post. So that's one of the failures. There also, even though this wasn't highlighted in our pass and fails, this was one of the things that I found in testing, was that there was a huge problem with inconsistency. So throughout the apps versus the desktop site. So for example, on the app, you have this heart button, then like a comment button, and then like a diagonal arrow, and then a bookmark. And then on the desktop, you actually have a heart, a comment, and then like a send button. So they don't usually even use the same, you know, visuals across their site, different formats. So, you know, that's really important from an accessibility perspective, that consistency is included. So here, for example, default operation on your app, the default operation is that the video plays automatically, but on desktop, the default operation is that it doesn't play automatically. So once another thing that's not consistent. And also when you actually hit that kind of diagonal arrow send button, on the app, you have a send to various people that are on Instagram that you're friends with. Whereas if you hit it on desktop, your options are share to Facebook, share to Messenger, share to Twitter, share via email, copy link, and you don't have those options on the app. In terms of turning off the autoplay on desktop, you don't need to turn it off because it doesn't autoplay on desktop, which is great. To turn off autoplay, you can only set it so that it turns it off when you're using mobile data. You cannot turn it off for everything. So if you're connecting to Instagram on Wi-Fi, then your videos are going to autoplay. On iOS, and actually it's exactly the same on Android, you go to the profile page, you select the hamburger menu in the top right, select settings, then account, and then cellular data use, mobile data use, and you switch the autoplay off at that point. And in terms of adding alternative text, you can't actually add images on the desktop, so you can't add alternative text. On iOS and Android, they are exactly the same. You select an image to post. On the new post page where you talk about you know, the caption and things like that, there is a text called advanced settings. Now, if you have any kind of vision impairment, you probably can't see it. It's about mid-screen. It's in grey writing on a white background in very small type, but I promise you it's there. So, tap that, then select write alt text, and then write the alt text. But be aware if you have on that page selected share to Facebook or share to any of the other social media networks, the alt text that you have written here will not get shared. And so I shared a photo of a bird on Instagram, and I selected it to share also on Facebook. And what happened was the Instagram alternative text was, you know, crow sitting on top of a house. The Facebook alternative text was image may contain bird. So be aware that if you can't use that share to multiple outlets if you have a post with an image. So Instagram is problematic in that way. In terms of Instagram accessibility, add alternative text to all your images. You should burn captions into your videos because there's no way to turn on and off captions. So that's the best way to do it. Be careful of color contrast in your images if you're conveying information. And so does anyone have any questions about Instagram?
None posted so far.
Excellent. LinkedIn. The only things that passed were the autoplay in settings and that the video can be paused. The screen reader register and create post was very difficult. Login and read post could be done easily. So, you know, field labels were problematic, infinite scrolling, and on iOS, you can't actually add accessibility features. So LinkedIn is the page title on home, and it's also the page title on a whole lot of, it's basically the page title on all pages, except for login. So page titles were problematic. In terms of turning off autoplay, you select the profile icon, select settings and privacy under the account account section, select the account tab, select site preferences, and then select autoplay or unselect autoplay videos. For iOS and Android, the steps are the same. You go to the profile page, you select the settings icon, you select account, and then autoplay videos. When you want to add alternative text to desktop, you add a picture, select add picture, then choose your picture, and then select the add alt text button. You cannot add alternative text if you're on the iOS or Android devices. So for LinkedIn, make sure all your images have alternative text. Make sure your profile has a clear image. Search for contacts using Google, not the LinkedIn search, and avoid using the LinkedIn mail system. Does anyone have any questions on LinkedIn?
None posted so far.
Excellent. So Pinterest. Pinterest failed all the non-screen reader tests and only passed the login screen reader test, and the read post was very difficult. Everything else was a failure. Editing the name was difficult. Selecting topics was difficult. You know, couldn't select interests on iOS, couldn't share pins on iOS, etc. There was actually a keyboard trap when we tested this. When you first created an account, there is a section that says more ideas for your board photography, and there's an explore button, and that is actually a keyboard trap. There's a heading here called More Like This, and it has a div class of something ridiculous, a whole bunch of random letters, as opposed to not coded with H1, H2, H3, etc. On your main page, the only headings actually occur under two buttons, the plus and the question mark button, and that plus is when you add a pin and the question mark is help. So there's no actual headings on the page itself. You're unable to turn off autoplay on desktop. On iOS, you need to select the profile page, select the profile icon in the top left, then select the settings icon, then select privacy and data, and then you can select autoplay videos on cellular data, and then another option appears that allows you to disable autoplay videos on Wi-Fi as well. On Android, it's slightly different. You go to the profile page, you select the profile icon in the top left, you select the settings icon, then you select edit settings, then you can also unselect autoplay videos on cellular data, and then the autoplay videos on Wi-Fi will pop up and you can change that too. You're unable to add alternative text to desktop, and you're unable to add alternative text on iOS and Android. With Pinterest, it's always a good idea to identify your content as a pic, video, or audio. You can apparently, once saved, edit the pin and add a description. However, we couldn't actually find that feature. And we also recommend that you burn captions into your videos. Any questions on Pinterest?
I'm not seeing anything posted.
Okay, next is Twitter. So, Twitter. The only thing that it passed was having the autoplay and settings and page titles. Everything else failed, and with the screen reader tests, everything was very difficult. With the page titles, we did pass it, but sometimes when they referred to the site, they had -Twitter, and sometimes they had /Twitter, which was interesting. With the screen reader, verification is difficult, as is following someone. I mentioned before the alternative text, how you have to turn that on in settings first, which is a problem. Lack of headings make using a screen reader with Twitter very difficult. And so their videos autoplay and are not keyboard accessible. So this is a violation of the non-interference clauses in WCAG 2 of 1.4.2 audio control and 2.2.2 pause, stop, hide. So basically you have a video that autoplays, and if you're using the keyboard, you can't actually pause. The right-hand column is not accessible to the keyboard because of the use of infinite scrolling in the center column. So you've got your header, then you've got your left-hand column, you've got the center column with all the posts, and then you've got your right-hand column with who to follow on live videos, etc. But you can never, as a keyboard user, get to the right-hand column because you're stuck in the infinite scrolling. There's also inconsistency in headings. This is, one example here where under accessibility on iOS, you've got a whole bunch of different options, such as pronounce hash as hashtag, include usernames in timelines, read shortened URLs, magic tap action, increase color contrast, compose image descriptions, reduce motion. Whereas on desktop, you just got compose image descriptions and video autoplay. In terms of turning off autoplay, sorry, go to your profile page, select more in the left-hand navigation, select settings and privacy, select accessibility under motion, and then you can select video play. You can choose on cellular or on Wi-Fi, and also never. On iOS, and Android, they're exactly the same steps. You select the profile icon in the top left-hand corner, select settings and privacy, then accessibility, and then there's a video autoplay option. There are 2 steps to adding alternative text on desktop. First, you go to the profile page, select more in left-hand navigation, select settings and privacy, then accessibility under general, then select compose image descriptions. Then when you actually add an image, under the image is the text add description, select that and add alt text. For iOS and Android, the steps are the same, but it's also a 2-step process. you select the profile icon in the top left-hand corner, select settings and privacy, select accessibility, select compose image descriptions, and then once you are creating a post, add the image, and you can select add description button, which overlays the bottom left of the image. With Twitter accessibility, use the alternative text description, use camel case, and there are accessibility tips on Twitter. There are alternative methods to the desktop interface. There is EasyChirp, which is a website, Twitterrific, which is an iOS app, and Metal on Android. Any questions on Twitter?
None so far.
YouTube. The video can be paused, which is great, and page titles are accessible. For the screen reader, all items were difficult. So this is an example. I want to talk a little bit about the autoplay on YouTube. So, you know, yes, it is, you are able to turn off autoplay, but that's not really an accessible way of turning off autoplay. So for example, here is a video, and when you first visit a video page, the focus starts on the play button. And the reason why they do that is so that it's really easy to pause the video. But the only way to turn off autoplay is to then tab through all the comments and get to the right-hand column. Now, if it's a really popular video with, you know, 4 million views and, you know, 3,000 comments, there's infinite scrolling on those comments. And so you could perhaps, you know, never, or only after you've got some RSI, get to the right-hand column to turn off autoplay. Now, autoplay has been in this, this position for a long time, and initially it was not actually keyboard accessible. It is keyboard accessible, and then it didn't have a keyboard focus indicator, and now it does have a keyboard focus indicator. So they are improving it, but still its location is problematic. And the other problem is if you don't have, so if you don't have autoplay disabled, then what actually happens is it plays an ad, then it plays the video, then it plays 2 more ads, and then it plays the next video. So, you know, having that kind of, that's sort of not equivalent, which is a problem. We also have some content coded as a heading. So for example, this choose the thumbnail that best represents your video. To be able to use custom thumbnails, your account needs to be verified and in good standing. Learn more. That's all coded as a heading. And you can only turn off the autoplaying of another video on finishing the first video, as in you can't turn off autoplay entirely. You can only just turn off autoplaying the second video. For mobile, you can actually turn off autoplay. On iOS, and Android, the steps are the same. Profile icon in the top right, select settings, and then select autoplay. So at least on mobile, you can turn it off. In desktop, you can add captions to videos, and this is if you have existing captions. You upload video, select the edit video button under the video, select the advanced tab. You must select the video language, otherwise you're not going to be able to upload captions. Then you can select upload subtitles CC, choose either with timing or without timing, select your captions file and save, and just be aware that the processing may take several hours. If you're using the auto captioning on YouTube, that's not a terrible thing as long as you download it and, you know, make some changes. So what you need to do is select the button English by YouTube Automatic, then select download and download the captions file and open it in a suitable app. If you don't have one, you can use Notepad. You can then edit it as required, then select upload subtitles CC, select with timing, select your captions file to upload, select the button English by YouTube Automatic, and then select delete. So that is the process of adding captions. You can't add audio descriptions on desktop. You can't add captions on iOS or on Android, and you can't add audio descriptions on mobile. For YouTube, make sure you warn users of the autoplay. Make sure there is a transcript, captions, and audio descriptions, and there is a page on using YouTube with a screen reader. The alternative methods to the desktop interface, and you can Google these and find these. There's the accessible interface to YouTube, the accessible YouTube, and access YouTube. However, the most accessible solution you're going to find is actually hosting your videos on YouTube or Vimeo and actually playing them on your website through an accessible player, such as Ozplayer or AblePlayer. And any questions on YouTube or about the presentation itself?
You have 2 questions in the queue right now. The first question from Judy: have you tested videos that were posted to websites using Vimeo?
No. That's a quick answer. But are you talking about the Vimeo? Actually, are you talking about the Vimeo player? Using the Vimeo player?
I will give Judy a chance to clarify. Judy, if you'd like to ask verbally, please let me know. Happy to unmute your mic. Or if not, you can just... Oh, perfect. There, she responded. She said, yes, you answered it in your last slide.
Okay, excellent.
Perfect. And then Judy had another question. Does it make a difference if the video is a YouTube or MP4?
When you're hosting on your own site, no, it doesn't. But it's much more, we tested, say, posting a video on Vimeo and then playing it using the Vimeo player on your site, and that's not accessible. But if you have an MP4 player, MP4 video, or you have a YouTube video and you're playing it on your site through another player, then another video player, then both of them will be equally accessible.
All right, I think those are the only questions we have at the moment. I did want to point out one thing though. I've been doing quite a bit of YouTube work and working with the captions, and the new YouTube Studio Beta has a feature to allow you to edit the captions directly on the video. I don't know how compatible that is with screen readers. I'm not a screen reader user, so I won't make any claims that way. But if you're just doing some little quick edits, it is a much faster way than downloading the file and then switching or making your changes in Notepad and then re-uploading.
Well, excellent. We'll look at that next year.
I am a fan. Not great for big edits, but for the little quick ones where you catch a misspelling or something, it's great.
Yeah, there's a few of them.
We do also have a question from Megan. I think you said that on Facebook we should link to the video transcript. Would we just put that link in the video post description? Also, we've been uploading captions for Facebook videos as SRT files, so I believe the user has the option of whether to see them. Is that accessible?
Excellent, thanks Megan. So the first question, yes. You should link to the video transcript. Just put that in the video post description so it's available to everyone. Uploading captions for Facebook videos as SRT files. I must say I haven't tested this myself, but the information I found was that posting to YouTube and then using them for, pulling it in from Facebook was more accessible, but I am not sure if that is still the case. So I do know though that actually, yeah, so in our testing, what we found was that there was a video that had captions, but if you if you went to Facebook and you were not logged in, you couldn't get the captions. Whereas if you were logged in, you could get the captions. So I'd say there is probably still some problem around Facebook captions and things, but I might look into that and get back to you. So Megan, if you're happy to share your email address with Kevin, I'll have a look and send you an email, and I might actually even write a blog post about it. And I'd love to hear other people's, examples of like social media failures, or, social media apps that you find are very accessible.
We do have plenty of time left for questions and comments, so if anyone has those questions, please take advantage of having Gian and Raf here now. They are a wealth of information on the subject. And if you have those examples and would just like to have a little conversation with Gian right now, please let me know. I'm happy to unmute your lines.
And yeah, feel free to ask me anything. We actually are doing these kind of accessibility wizard hours next year. So, you can call in and ask questions. So this can be a little accessibility wizard 20 minutes.
Megan just asked, can you give some examples of good photo alt text / some alt text do's and don'ts?
Yes, I can.
That could be a webinar in itself.
Yes, it can. Let me just share my screen, because I will definitely, let's see. Oh, look, it's already on our site. Talk about that, but there's also resources on our site. So here's the social media post. These are the 3 social media posts, and the one that Raf wrote is down here. But a great place to go is articles. And so basically here we've got somewhere here, where is it? Images. So here are some great articles around images, if I say so myself, because I did write them. But basically, when it comes to alt attributes, basically, most of the time when you're writing an alt attribute for an image, you actually don't want to describe what the image looks like. You want to describe the function of the image. So for example, you wouldn't say that this image here is an arrow going towards a door. You actually want to say this is the alt attribute for this text here would be current page. However, the exception is for things like photos that you're posting to Instagram, or images that are in an image gallery or something like that. At that point, you do actually want to actually talk specifically about what the image looks like. And let's see if I can show some examples. Let me just find one so I can just talk about some examples. Okay. So earlier this year, my dad and I drove from Queensland to Melbourne, which is about a 24-hour drive, and I took some photos of the trip. And so this here is one of the photos that we took. And so you need to really think about why you're showing this photo. Now, this photo shows, 9/10 of the photo is the sky, and the clouds are huge, and then you've got really flat, very green / grey / brown, bush, grass, etc. So if this is an image in an image gallery about Australia, then you'd want to say something like, Australia is a, very flat, grey and green, outback with a huge sky that overwhelms you, or something like that. If this is a example of if this is, say, an image gallery of clouds, then you'd want to say this is and I'm making this up, the cumulus cloud. As you can see, they're quite overwhelming, and this is an example of what you would see in Australia. So that's one example. Let me find another. So this here is a red-ringed parakeet. This is a bird in Australia. So once again, it depends what the image gallery or why you're posting it. If I'm posting it because I'm a photographer and I want to say, hey, look how wonderful my photos are, I'd say, you know, a parrot that's perhaps the body being 4 inches, the tail being 4 inches, bright green with a red ring around its neck, and you know, and eyes and red beak. If you want to say something about this is the kind of this is actually a pest in Australia. It's not a pest, it's a captive bird that's been released. Then you perhaps would say, keep an eye out for these birds. You know, they have a specific voice, you know, which is like this, and they are characterized by their bright green color, you know, red ring around their neck, and their tail feathers being as long as their body, or something along those lines. Does that make sense?
I'll give Megan a chance to respond, but I found that very informative. And if just to sort of summarize, if I'm understanding properly, you want to think not only about describing visually what's in the image, but also the intent of the
Exactly.
image in context.
Exactly. And that's where, when you're writing alt attributes for maps, I know a lot of people go, oh, you can't really write an alt attribute or a long description for a map, but you can if you know what the map is there for. You know, if the map is there to say, you know, this is where the Museum of Modern Art is, then you might want to say, you know, here's your parking locations, here's your train stops, here's how you know, what street corner it is. Whereas if you want to say, you know, look how far it is from where I live, then that's something completely different.
How long would you say alt text for something like an Instagram photo should be? Let's say I'm a typical millennial and I take a photo of everything I eat. How long should my description of my paella be?
So I would say that you don't want your alt attributes to be longer than 100 characters. As soon as you hit more than 100 characters, you're probably getting into long description territory. Now, don't be concerned if you're like 120. It's just, that's a kind of, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just kind of an average. So if you really feel like, you know, 120 is what you need, then yeah, feel free to use that. But, you know, usually go for around 100 characters. And I don't mean, so the shorter, you know, like if you can shorten it, it's better, if that makes sense. But yeah, so if you can get away with saying, you know, saying something in 20 characters, then don't feel you need to add stuff to it. Raf, do you have any comments on this, seeing as you're the one that will be listening to all this alt attributes?
Yes, a few comments. So you should also avoid providing information, providing more information in the alt for an image than a sighted person gets. So if you post a post, for instance, on Facebook, and I know there's a picture of your house or something. So if it is not obvious for sighted persons where it is, you shouldn't add this information in the alt attribute, like, I don't know, an old house in London. If you are not informing sighted persons about it. And I will give one example. Let's say it's a picture of a bridge. So I know you are on this bridge. So if this bridge is not famous, not recognized by everyone at a first glance, so you should describe this bridge in an alt description. But if it is, for instance, Golden Gate Bridge, so then it's enough to type the name in the image, because because then it is exactly the same information that a sighted person gets while seeing a Golden Bridge picture or Eiffel Tower picture or Statue of Liberty.
Excellent. And I'd also like to add that you shouldn't generally use the word photographic or image, with the exception of, so we did some work for Museum Victoria, and they had like a photo of you know, a 1920s steel work mill. And so the alt attribute should be black and white photo of, you know, 1920s steel work mill, because the fact that it's a photo is important. But you don't need to say in Instagram, this is a photo of a red ringed parakeet. You can just say red ringed parakeet. The screen reader will tell the user that it's an image.
One more comment, do not be afraid of using colors in the description. So if someone is wearing, I don't know, a yellow dress, so just write it. It's also helpful.
And one last comment, gosh, I could talk about alt attributes all day. One last comment is that I know that screen reader users often have differing opinions on this. So don't feel if someone comes up to you or you get a comment that says your alt descriptions are not descriptive enough, or your alt descriptions are too descriptive, then that's a good indication of what that person wants. I've done training for people who worked on the Disability Online site, and so everyone who worked on that site had a disability, and we had 4 or 5 screen reader users, and they had this massive argument in the middle of the day about whether the alt attribute for like a picture of, you know, Baywatch should be Baywatch, or it should be, you know, skinny white woman in red bikini, or if it should be skinny white woman in red bikini running along the beach while the waves crash behind her. So alt attributes definitely are more of an art than a science. And what I'd suggest is that you actually decide how it is that you want to write your alt attributes, and then be consistent within your organization about what it is, how you write those things. And absolutely, if you get a whole, you know, 3 or 4 people saying your alt attributes are too descriptive, then maybe listen to them. But, you know, one person's opinion is not necessarily going to be the right opinion. And I'm not saying that that, with an exception of someone who's already working in the accessibility field like Raf. Raf has very good opinions on alt attributes for 2 reasons. 1, he has to listen to a lot of them, and 2, he works in the accessibility industry. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some differing of opinion when it comes to writing alt attributes.
We did have another question come in. So this is from Satish. When we upload a video on social media, is it important to have both captions and a transcript?
Yes, absolutely. I actually have just, or we're about to release a set of testing guidelines for mobile. And one of the things that we actually require on mobile that is more than WCAG 2 requires is that you need to have not just captions and audio descriptions, but also transcripts. And so transcripts are absolutely essential for a number of reasons. One of them for people who, you know, can't actually play the video because the video player is not accessible. And really the only 2 video players that are accessible are AusPlayer and AblePlayer, and even then they have, both of them have issues. So there are going to be some users that can't open the video, so therefore having the transcript is really important. There's also a group of users who they might have ADHD, or they might get motion sickness or something like that, who just can't watch the video because of their, you know, illness or their disability. So in that regard, you want them to have a transcript. Then there's people like me who I'm definitely not a millennial. I hate videos. I will read, you know, 5 pages before I watch a 2-minute video. And so people like me, if I want the content, it has to be in a transcript. Now, of course, the latter is not an accessibility issue, but definitely, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only person out there that feels like that, being a Gen Xer. So in terms of making things available to as many people as possible, WCAG 2 doesn't require it, but I believe in terms of making sure something is accessible, that it absolutely needs to have a transcript.
All right, we do have a couple of more minutes before we're out of time, so please feel free to keep those questions coming.
Oh, and
Go
Megan,
ahead.
yep. Let me just show you, you said the alt text do's and don'ts. If you go to our fact sheets and then go to images, it has the principles here, which is like, these are the do's. Always use the alt attribute, do not rely on content to color alone, etc. It's also got an impact on users. This is what happens if, images are missing alt attributes. Then it has this manager checklist, which is like your yes, no's, and you've got to develop a checklist as well, which has, correct examples and incorrect examples. So these fact sheets are definitely, and all of them have this level of information, or a wealth of information in terms of, those kind of do's and don'ts.
Should also add that Judy posted a link to the Web Accessibility Initiative tutorials in the chat for images as well. So that's also a great resource. So we do have a few more minutes for questions. So please, if you do have any, go ahead and put them in. In the meantime, I did post a feedback survey in the chat. We would love to hear from you if you have a few minutes. The survey only takes maybe 2 or 3. And your opinions really help us in crafting these webinar series for the future. So if you would like to see certain topics or would like to see more of this topic or anything like that, please take a moment to fill out that survey. If you've attended past IAAP webinars in the 2019 series, you can fill out the survey more than one time. The very first question just asks which webinar you are completing the survey for. So please feel free to do that. We appreciate it. I will give everyone just a few more minutes to type in some questions here. But I, first of all, would like to give a huge thanks to Gian and Raf and the rest of the team at Accessibility Oz. This was a fantastic and informative session, and we are super grateful for the work that you do with social media.
You're welcome.
I'd also like to thank the team at AI Media for our captions today. You guys do a great job. And I'm not seeing any questions come in. So yeah, one final thanks to all of our attendees and especially to Gian and Raf. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we go. As I mentioned, this session is being recorded, so we'll make that available in the archive. And we do have one final webinar coming up in the 2019 Professional Development Webinar Series, and that is going to be with the team from the Minnesota State Government, and they will be talking about how they deployed accessible email and document templates at scale across the Minnesota State Government. So that should be a very interesting topic as well. We hope to see you join us for that one. Finally, we have the 2020 Professional Development Series coming up. We are in the selection process now. We're in the first round of our webinar vetting, but the submission form is still open. So if you do want to present a webinar, please feel free to go to our website, and under the Education tab of our main menu, there's some information on the call for 2020 webinars. Feel free to check that out and submit any proposals. We're always happy to consider them for the 2020 series, or if we like it but the series is already full, we might hold it for 2021 or even some of our topic-specific webinar series. So please feel free to check that out as well. All right, that does conclude today's webinar. So everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, Raf.